Tippi Hedren was the star that said no to Alfred Hitchcock. At first, he made her famous, but when she rejected him, he made her disappear. She was stalked, harassed, blacklisted, and for decades, no one in Hollywood said a word. I've seen The Birds more times than I can count, and I used to think it was just another eerie Hitchcock classic, but once you know what really happened behind the scenes, it changes everything. In this video, we're breaking down what Tippi Hedren endured on the set of The Birds and Marnie, how Hitchcock's obsession turned into something much darker, and why the truth stayed hidden for so long. Before she became one of Alfred Hitchcock's most talked about stars, Tippi Hedren was best known for gracing the covers of Glamour and Life magazines. She wasn't an actress in the traditional sense. In fact, she had no major acting experience at all. She was a fashion model, working steadily but not famous. Then, one day in 1961, Hitchcock saw her in a commercial for a diet drink called Seago. That 30-second ad changed everything. Without ever meeting her, he ordered a screen test. And not just any screen test, this one cost Universal $25,000, close to $250,000 today, and had Tippi reenacting scenes from Rebecca, Notorious, and To Catch a Thief opposite Martin Balsam. When Hitchcock saw the footage, he decided she would be the next great Hitchcock blonde. Landing a lead role in a Hitchcock film wasn't just a big break, it was a career-making opportunity. By that time, Alfred Hitchcock wasn't just a famous director, he was a brand. Known as the master of suspense, he had already directed Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, and North by Northwest. His reputation for crafting stars like Grace Kelly, Ingrid Bergman, Kim Novak was legendary. His films had earned multiple Oscar nominations, and his name alone could sell out a theater. For someone with no film credits, being cast as a lead in The Birds was unprecedented. Universal even introduced her to the press as the next Grace Kelly, and Hitchcock took personal control over her image, including how she dressed, how she spoke in interviews, and even how her name appeared, always in single quotes, Tippi. But while the role came with the Hollywood spotlight, it also came with something darker. Hitchcock's behavior on set was odd from the beginning. He isolated Tippi, discouraging her from socializing with the crew, and took a strange amount of personal interest in her day-to-day movements. Even her lunch breaks were closely watched. One studio insider later said he was obsessed with her, completely. This was Tippi's first ever movie in Hollywood. It almost seemed too good to be true. Little did she know, Hitchcock had a strange obsession with his blonde leading ladies, one that had already left its mark on several women before her. Grace Kelly, his most famous muse, had starred in 3 of his films, but she retired from acting after marrying the Prince of Monaco. Many believed Hitchcock never got over it. He referred to her as the epitome of elegance and tried to mold future actresses in her image. When Vera Miles, another blonde he had claimed, became pregnant and pulled out of Vertigo, Hitchcock reportedly never forgave her. He later said that she had betrayed him by prioritizing her family over his vision. Kim Novak, who eventually took the role, clashed with him on set and criticized his cold, calculating directing style. She once said he wanted control. Complete control. Janet Leigh, who starred in Psycho, described Hitchcock as aloof and completely removed emotionally during filming. Even Ingrid Bergman felt his obsessive attention. He would often direct her in a whisper and make her repeat takes until her voice was raw. Film scholars have long pointed out a pattern in Hitchcock's casting. Cool, blonde, distant. His films often featured women who were punished on screen, strangled, stalked, or psychologically broken. He once explained his preference bluntly, saying, "Blondes are like virgin snow that show every footprint." That comment, meant to be poetic, now reads as deeply unsettling. His casting wasn't just about looks, it was about power. He wanted women he could project onto, control, and in many ways manipulate. The more they resisted, the more difficult he became. By the time Tippi Hedren arrived on set, Hitchcock had already established himself as a director who saw actresses not as collaborators but as clay to be molded. Tippi's experience on the set of The Birds would soon turn into a real-life horror. The warning signs were already there, but things took a disturbing turn during the final days of filming The Birds. One of the most cherished scenes, where Tippi's character is attacked in the attic, was originally written to use mechanical birds. That's what she was told. But when she arrived on set, there were boxes of live birds waiting. Over 5 grueling days, they tied birds to her costume with nylon strings and hurled them at her on Hitchcock's orders. One bird pecked so close to her eye, she feared she'd lose her vision. Her breaking point came after a particularly brutal take when she collapsed in tears on the floor. A physician was called and ordered her to rest for a week. In her memoir, Tippi, published in 2016, she said it wasn't just physically painful, it felt like psychological warfare. It was brutal, ugly, and relentless. She wrote years later. Cary Grant, who was visiting the set, told her, "You're the bravest woman I've ever seen." But the worst wasn't over. There was a scene earlier in the film where Tippi's character is attacked inside a phone booth. A pane of safety glass was supposed to shatter in a controlled way. Instead, it exploded unexpectedly, cutting her face. Once again, Hitchcock showed little concern for her safety. He never apologized and said he complimented the footage and kept shooting. Even during her breaks, she wasn't allowed to decompress. She later revealed that her dressing room was likely bugged, and Hitchcock always seemed to know what she was doing and who she spoke with. By the time The Birds wrapped, Hitchcock was no longer hiding his obsession. He demanded complete control over her public image and began orchestrating her time off set. His behavior escalated quickly once production started on Marnie, the psychological thriller he cast her in immediately afterward. On the set, Hitchcock's abuse became more explicit and more dangerous. According to Tippi, he began asking her to meet privately in his office and trailer. He would make crude remarks, leer at her body, and attempt to grope her. She recalled one moment during a limousine ride when he lunged at her and tried to forcibly kiss her. She later stated it was an awful, awful moment. In another incident, he ordered everyone off set under the pretense of rehearsing a scene privately, then tried to force her to lie down and kiss him. She resisted. Tippi recalled, "It was sexual, it was perverse, and it was ugly." Hitchcock continued to isolate her from the rest of the cast. Diane Baker, who co-starred in Marnie, said years later that it was difficult to watch how he treated Tippi. He reportedly gave her no direction except through intermediaries, and often stared at her silently with no expression, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. According to Tippi, Hitchcock began fantasizing about her out loud, even telling her he had dreamed she confessed her love to him. She replied flatly, "But it was a dream. Just a dream." When she asked to travel to New York to accept an award, he refused. He dictated what she could wear, who she could talk to, and where she was allowed to go. At one point, she said he told her, "You are to make yourself sexually available to me, however and whenever and wherever I want." It all came to a head when she finally stood up to him. Tippi looked at Hitchcock in the eye and told him the truth. She would never sleep with him. Not now, not ever. She had endured enough. The power he thought he had over her didn't work anymore. What came next would show just how far Hitchcock was willing to go to make her pay for saying no. After Tippi Hedren told Alfred Hitchcock she would never give in to his advances, he didn't scream or retaliate in the moment. Instead, he quietly made good on a threat he had already hinted at. He didn't fire her, that would have been too easy. Instead, he kept her locked in her exclusive studio contract, then refused to cast her in anything. She was still under contract to him, still technically a Hitchcock actress, but he let her sit in silence. silence. For nearly 2 years, she remained tied to a director who was actively suppressing her career. Offers from other studios came in, promising roles, top directors, and Hitchcock rejected them all. He wouldn't let her work for anyone else, but he had no intentions of working with her again. Tippi said, "I was being punished, and he made sure I understood that." She eventually found a way to work again, but the momentum she had after The Birds and Marnie was gone. Hollywood had a short memory for actresses who disappeared, and no one at the time was willing to challenge Hitchcock. He was still too powerful, too respected. His influence stretched across every studio, every casting office. By the time her contract finally expired, the damage was done. She continued acting, taking smaller roles in lower-budget films, and later became a prominent animals rights activist. But the career she might have had, the A-list roles, the longevity, the recognition, was taken from her before it ever really began. For decades, she didn't speak about what happened. Part of it was fear, part of it was the era. She said, "In those days, you didn't talk about these things." When she finally did go public, first in interviews, then in her 2016 memoir, Tippi, the industry listened differently. She detailed the abuse, the harassment, and the isolation. She wrote about how Hitchcock's obsession turned violent and cruel, and how her refusal to submit came with consequences that shaped the rest of her life. She stated, "It wasn't about love, it was about control. He wanted ownership." When her granddaughter, actress Dakota Johnson, publicly supported her and discussed the abuse in interviews, the story resurfaced again. This time in a post-Me Too world. Tippi was no longer a forgotten starlet with a strange director story. She was a woman who said no to one of the most powerful men in Hollywood and paid the price. She never returned to the spotlight Hitchcock had once promised, but she also never gave him the satisfaction of silence. Years later, when asked if she regretted stepping into that world, knowing how dark it became, she didn't hesitate, stating, "He ruined my career, but he didn't ruin my life." For Tippi Hedren, surviving wasn't just about walking away, it was about refusing to let Hitchcock have the final word. And in the end, he didn't. Hitchcock was a brilliant filmmaker, there's no doubt about it, but behind all that talent was a man who clearly had some issues, and it sounded like Tippi Hedren took the brunt of it. What do you think of Tippi Hedren's experience with Hitchcock? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more jaw-dropping drama from classic Hollywood, go watch my video on the feud between Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. It's a wild one, and it's linked here and down below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.